real time. Welcome to the East Oakland Community Emission Reduction Plan, the CERT. This is our committee meeting number 27. It's March 13th, 2025. Let's get it. Right now, we'll have the interpretation instructions.
I'll begin interpretation now.
Gigi and Maria, take it over. Okay. Well, we'll take our time.
We're in the English channel right now. Okay, let me.
All right. Welcome to the CSC meeting. Once again, I'm your co-chair, Ayana Johnson. We also have Mr. Charles Reed, Michaela Patton, the other co-chair. So this is our AB617 CSC meeting for March 13, 2025. So our meeting objective.
Remember to say next slide.
Next slide, I'm sorry. So our meeting objectives: provide information on airport pollution and empower CSC members to collaborate on strategies and actions to address airport pollution. Answer questions that CSC members may have raised about airport pollution and operations. Also, we're going to provide background information on the commercial and industrial focus areas. And then we're going to evaluate part 1 of the commercial and industrial strategies and objectives. So next slide, we'll have our meeting agenda. So we have our welcome agenda, about 8 minutes. And then we have our CSC number 26 recap, about 2 minutes for February. Then airport presentations, that's going to take about 25 minutes. And then we have our airport activities, that's 30 minutes. Then, thank God we get a break, 7 minutes. Commercial and industrial introduction, that's about 20 minutes. Our commercial and industrial activities, 23 minutes. And then we're going to report out outreach and engagement. We got 1 minute of your time. Then we're going to do our next steps and close out at the end of the minutes, which will be 4 minutes. So next slide, we have our initial meeting agreements and those for participation. 1 mic, 1 voice. If in person, please raise your hand to speak. If on Zoom, use the raise hand function under the reactions at the bottom of your screen. Have grace for yourself and make sure you have it for one another. Take care of yourself. Make sure you stretch, drink water, and don't forget to breathe. Mutual respect, empowerment, and active listening for all participants. To allow everyone to participate, please limit your comments and speaking times to 2 minutes. We actively give reminders and we also give alerts. Popcorning or passing the mic method will be used to encourage participation amongst quieter CSC members. For any questions throughout the meeting, if in person, please raise your hand and ask a question. If on Zoom, in addition to the hand raising, you may also be able to use the Zoom chat. So CBE and backend staff will be responding to your questions. So on our next slide, we have community building. In-person attendees are encouraged to interact with fellow participants during the dinner meet and greet. Virtual attendees, please type in the Zoom chat, put in your name, your pronouns, and any affiliated organizations you may be with. Community building on Zoom, use chat and the reaction emojis to inspire and encourage one another. No, CSD members, please raise your hand if you're not able to type into the chat and we'll have you speak out loud. Now we'll go ahead and move on to, we'll take it over for Charles.
Yes, where we are today. Currently, we're wrapping up the first quarter of 2025. Quarter two will begin next month in April. We're in the final stages of developing our plan action. Staff will also circle back with the CSC to finalize plan level goals in April. Staff is working on writing a plan of chapters for CSC review this summer. And so as you guys see, we are about to go into our strategy development stage. And this is where all of our creativity and ideas should be heard and need to be added to this activity. And now we will be passing it on to
Arlie.
Hi everyone, thank you. My name is Carly Cabral. I work for CBE. I'm going to give the CSC number 26 recap, which is a recap of last meeting. So the recap of February CSC number 26, honoring Black History Month and Public Health and Wellness presentation and activity. In honor of Black History Month, co-chairs shared a video of Hazel M. Johnson, the mother of environmental justice from the South Side of Chicago. Just Cities also gave a presentation on public health and wellness overview example actions and led a breakout activity on public health and wellness example actions, answering the following questions. What resonates with you about these actions, and what is something that we have not addressed through these actions? Next slide, please. Thank you. And a recap of the presentation on community description from the last meeting. Air District staff presented on the draft community description and overview chapter for the East Oakland SERP, which covered the principles of EJ, or environmental justice, background and purpose of the community description, and sections of the community description. We also heard from the following East Oakland CSC members for their community perspectives from their lived experiences in East Oakland: Ms. Cecilia Cunningham, Ayanna Johnson, co-chair, Marina Munoz, Michaela Patton, youth co-chair, Mr. Charles Reed, the other co-chair, and lastly, Gabrielle Sloan Law. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. All right, and here we're just going to give a quick illegal dumping special meeting recap. We held an illegal dumping special meeting on February 27th from 6 to 8, where Oakland Public Works and City of Oakland came to present on their existing programs for illegal dumping. And Becca messaged me to let me know that they are currently at urgent care right now. So unfortunately, they might not be able to give a recap in this section. So I'll pass it to Andrea Blackman.
No lo iban a dejar salir.
Yes.
Luego,
So during the illegal dumping session, we had a good talk that started off with logistics. They explained that they have limited capacity, but feel that they are able to get through all of our 311 calls. They noted that not every illegal dumping site is being called in, and so they encouraged us to raise awareness about calling 311. And then if we see it there consistently, to call our district representatives. They're able to escalate certain situations, and also the district representatives have a set amount of dumpsters that they can provide to their district. We talked about enforcement and some chronic issues that they were having. Some of the crew members get to the dumping sites and their safety concerns. People are doing other illegal activities at that same space. And also there's some laws for unhoused people where you're not allowed to just take their items off the street and dump them. So we talked a lot about that. We really were trying to bring up the conversation about increased pickup, maybe making it a regular routine. But they pointed out that having a regular routine at a pickup site actually creates an expectation that it's actually legal to dump there because the items are going to be picked up at a certain time. So they advise that we refrain from that and that we focus more on preventing the illegal dumping from happening in the first place.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, and we'll be coming back to the CSC to present some of the solutions that we heard from that meeting. So more to come on that. And now I'm going to be presenting with Air District Stephen Reed on the Oakland International Airport emissions. So I just want to begin by stating that if anyone has any questions at any point of this presentation, please write them down so that we can take questions at the end of the presentation. If we do not get to all questions, we'll make sure to jot them down and circle back. Also, for questions that CBE and the Air District might need to follow up on, we might need some time to get back to you in order to address your questions. Thank you. Next slide. All right, so goals for airport presentation. To provide information to CSC members on airport-related pollution to better understand a large source of emissions in East Oakland. Secondly, to empower CSC members to collaborate on strategies and actions to address airport-related pollution. And lastly, to answer CSC member questions about airport-related pollution and operations. There were some questions from CSC members about sustainable aviation fuel, ultrafine particles, etc. So we aim to answer some of those questions here. And if anyone is interested in CBE's campaign or organizing work around the proposed expansion, please reach out with any questions. I'll write my email in the chat. All right, next slide, please. The Oak Airport background. So the airport is owned and operated by the Port of Oakland, governed by Port Commission. Some tenant companies that operate at the airport include passenger airlines. Southwest is a majority of flights, commercial cargo shipping, UPS and FedEx as an example, private aviation, smaller private planes, ground support operators, and businesses in the terminals like shops and restaurants. Next slide, please. All right, so here is a visual of a geographic map of the Oak Airport property. This is the airport from Oakland. Just to highlight that the red line indicates that's where 98th Avenue is in relation to San Leandro Street, which runs almost perpendicular, the green line there. And to mention also the schools that are dotted blue. The rest of the markers are below on the legend. So the purple line indicates the roadways, the black line indicates runways. You could see them on the south field here and north field. And the airport property is dashed in the blue line, which extends a little bit out into the ocean, as you can see. Most commercial flights leave from the south field along the water. All right, next slide, please. Proposed Oakland International Airport Terminal Modernization and Development Project. So the airport is currently a large source of emissions in East Oakland. Strategies and actions to address airport pollution are important in any outcome. The emphasis today is on understanding airport operations and how we can reduce emissions, no matter what happens with the expansion. The airport is a source of particulate matter and nitrogen oxides in East Oakland. The port is pursuing an expansion and modernization project, which will include a new terminal with up to 16 new gates, expanded and relocated fuel tanks and fuel infrastructure, expanded utility plant and more diesel backup generators, expanded parking, more than 1,000 new spaces, remediation and demolition of many facilities. And as some of you may know, CBE as an organization has opposed the expansion and has filed a lawsuit regarding the port's environmental impact report. If you'd like to learn more about CBE's campaign work, feel free to reach out. And we'll also notify of any CBE community meetings on this topic in the future. And with that, I will pass it to Steve.
Thanks so much, Carly, and I want to thank CB for their work on these slides and this whole airport issue in general. If we go on to the next slide, 18, you might remember that I think it was about a year and a half ago, I presented on the East Oakland emission inventory the district and CARB staff put together. Tonight, we're going to drill down and look just at the airport portion of that inventory. And so one thing I want to do is just define what are the main types of emission sources at the airport. There's four main categories: aircraft, ground support equipment, ground access vehicles, and stationary sources. And so on the next couple slides, we're going to define each of those in a little bit more detail, and then we'll look at emissions from each of those categories. So if we go on to the next slide, aircraft are the largest source of most pollutants that we look at and track in the inventory at the airport. And when we look at aircraft emissions, we have to consider emissions happening at multiple levels or heights above ground. So when we think about ground level emissions, aircraft taxi to the gate areas and back and forth to the runways. They have auxiliary power units that provide power when they're on the ground. Those things all cause ground level pollution. And then, of course, when they take off and land, they're producing emissions higher up in the atmosphere. And so we try to track and quantify all of those types of emissions from aircraft. For ground access vehicles, obviously, there's a variety of on-road vehicles that need to access the airport, whether that's associated with passengers, different types of cargo, employees going back and forth to work. The airport is a major attractor of on-road motor vehicle trips, and obviously that contributes to emissions locally. If we go on to the next slide, we also have to think about ground support equipment operating at the airport. So these are the tractors and trucks that move baggage and push aircraft back from the gate, provide different types of services to the cabin when the aircraft's on the ground, and so forth. And then stationary sources, these would be things like emergency generators, boilers, fuel storage tanks. Many of those sources are permitted and tracked by the Air District, and they're another source of pollution that's associated with the airport. So if we go on to the next slide, we're going to take a look at how those four categories of emissions contribute to the inventory of total emissions from the airport itself. And so we're looking here at the two categories of pollution that Carly just mentioned, PM 2.5 or fine particulate matter, and nitrogen oxides or NOx. These are things we've talked about before, and you know that fine PM is of concern because those particles can penetrate into the lungs and bloodstream and cause all kinds of health effects. And then NOx is a product mostly of fuel combustion, and so it also has health effects such as triggering asthma and respiratory diseases. And it also contributes to the secondary formation of fine particles in the atmosphere. So it has kind of a double impact. So if we look at the inventory of those four categories that we just talked about and how they contribute, you can see that for both PM 2.5 and NOx, aircraft are really emitting the lion's share of the emissions, about 3/4 of the PM 2.5 and almost 90% of the NOx emissions. And the other source categories are down more like 6 to 10%. So aircraft are the main source for sure. They're not the only source, but they are the main driver of emissions for most pollutants when it comes to the airport inventory. If we go on to the next slide, we also want to think about how those airport emissions fit into the bigger picture. How do they compare to other types of local sources? So that's what we're trying to do here on this slide with these stacked bar charts. So what I've done is I've taken the whole emission inventory for East Oakland that we talked about and that I shared a year and a half or so ago. And we're sort of looking at how does the airport fit in with other major categories like stationary permitted sources or on-road mobile sources. And you can see here that it really varies by pollutant, depending on which pollutant we look at. So if we look at NOx, you can see that bottom part of the stack bar is airport-related NOx emissions, and that accounts for 36% of the total NOx in the East Oakland inventory. So that's a big chunk. If we look at PM 2.5, the contribution is much smaller. It's about 3%. And so the impact of the airport is really going to vary depending on which pollutants we're looking at and what mix of sources we're looking at. So that's the main takeaway from this slide. But for NOx especially, it's a major source. And in fact, you can see here on this chart, it's comparable to emissions from total on-road motor vehicles in East Oakland. It's almost exactly equivalent. So that kind of gives you a sense of the scale. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, number 23. And what we want to drive home here is that those two pollutants that we're showing are just examples. Those are not the only pollutants of concern at the airport. Ultrafine particles are another major concern for airport impacts. These are particles that are even smaller, considerably smaller than PM 2.5. So these are only 1/10 of a micron, whereas PM 2.5 is 2.5 microns in diameter. And so because these particles are so small, they can penetrate even deeper into the lungs and bloodstream and contribute to adverse health effects. The ultrafine particles are especially associated with jet turbine engines. And so we're going to see in subsequent slides, studies have shown that ultrafine particles are usually elevated. The levels are elevated around airports because of the jet traffic. Other pollutants of concern are listed here, things like black carbon and lead and other air toxics. And again, studies have shown that those tend to be at elevated levels in areas around airports. Oh, if we go on to the next slide, research has also shown, as you might expect, that airport workers are exposed to the highest concentrations of aviation-related emissions. There's been a lot of research recently at Copenhagen Airport in Denmark, and they found there that ultrafine particle concentrations in areas where aircraft are being serviced are 2 to 3 times higher than have been measured at busy roadways in that city. So again, that just gives you a sense of the kind of scale we're talking about. And in fact, they found that baggage handlers were exposed to UFP concentrations that were similar to a confined smoking facility at the airport. And so obviously workers are going to be in danger from exposure to these pollutants and from their proximity to where the emissions are occurring. So if we go on to the next slide, we want to talk a little bit about kind of the extent of the airport emissions, how far can they reach, who might be impacted by airport emissions. Another study at Boston's Logan Airport measured pollutant concentrations and ultrafine particle counts in residences that were downwind of Logan Airport, and then they compared that to residences that were nearby but not downwind of the airport. And what they found is that at the downwind residences, the concentrations were up to 4 times higher than at the residences that were not downwind of the airport. So again, that just gives you a sense that folks who are living downwind of an airport are likely to be exposed to higher concentrations of ultrafine particles and other pollutants that we've been talking about. Now, who's downwind of Oakland Airport? Well, we are showing a windrows here that basically gives you a sense of where the winds are most often coming from. And what that's showing is that you can see there's kind of those 2 pedals that are sort of pointing to the left. And that basically means that the winds are coming from the west to the east for most of the year at Oakland Airport. And of course, folks experience that daily there. And so that tells you that East Oakland residences are directly downwind of the airport, given these prevailing wind conditions. And so these different types of emissions we're talking about are of particular concern. There is some variation by time of day and by season, but this is give you sort of an annual snapshot of where the wind's most often coming from during the course of a given year. So that's what we're seeing here. And then the last slide I'm going to cover just kind of wraps up some of the health concerns. If we go on the next slide, and just want to note that communities near airports experience not only these multiple sources of air pollution that we've been talking about, but other environmental health stressors as well, as you all know. So things like noise. We talked about traffic and congestion, that's going to be exacerbated in the area around the airport. And so, airports have, there's multiple concerns associated with the airport operations. If you want to read more on specific scientific findings, some of the things that we've touched on here tonight, CBE and the United Service Workers West, which is a union for airport employees, have put together a report on airport pollution and associated health impacts. There's a link here that you can access. This was just put together last year and served as a resource for what we're showing here tonight. So again, want to appreciate the work that went into that. So I'm going to turn it back to Carly to kind of wrap up the airport portion of tonight, and then we'll be able to take some questions before the breakouts.
Yes, thank you, Steve. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, please. So, what about alternative fuels? Airplanes are hard to transition to reduced or zero emissions technology. Hydrogen and electric planes, experts do not expect these to be viable until after 2050. So sustainable aviation fuel, a few bullet points on what it is. It's produced from a variety of feedstocks, including plant fuel crops and waste materials. Emissions of nitrogen oxides, NOx, and air toxics approximately equal to fossil jet fuel emissions. The fuel has reduced carbon dioxide emissions compared to fossil jet fuel, but some sustainable aviation fuels have very concerning environmental and social impacts, from the refining of the emissions, biodiversity loss, rising food prices, and water scarcity associated. Sustainable aviation fuel produced in 2023 met only 0.2% of global jet fuel demand, and ability to scale up is limited. The port reports currently 5% of total jet fuel at Oak is sustainable aviation fuel. Next slide, please. All right, and some examples of current progress addressing airport emissions here. Some law and regulations. CARB, California Air Resources Board, has begun scoping airport regulations. Goal to propose rules by 2027 and implement by 2030. California law banning sale and distribution of leaded aviation gas goes into effect in 2031, and various vehicle and equipment standards have been set by CARB. And for voluntary programs, we have Port of Oakland installing electrical infrastructure to allow tenants to use electric ground support equipment and ground power. And Los Angeles airports have committed to zero emissions ground support equipment for all commercial available equipment by 2033. And unfortunately, I do not much time for questions due to the intro taking a bit longer than expected. So if you have any questions, please make sure to note them. If you have any questions in person, please let staff know. That way that we can come back to your question. If you have any questions online, please put them in the chat so we can respond to them thoughtfully. Thank you. Next slide, please. All right, so that brings us into our activity. We'll have 3 breakout rooms, 2 online and 1 in person, focused on Oak Airport example actions. Each group will focus on actions under the following community concerns: emissions reductions at the Oakland Airport, Port of Oakland collaboration and accountability to community, technical analysis and monitoring of airport air quality and community health impacts. CSC members will join a group discussion led by a facilitator. Each breakout room will also have note taker and support staff. CSC members can share feedback through group discussion, Zoom chat, or using Google Docs, and facilitators will provide a brief report back. All right, and next slide, please. And for these example actions, we will be discussing the following questions: what resonates with you about these actions, and what is something that we have not addressed through these actions? All right, and now we'll be broken up into our breakout rooms.
Hi, everyone. We are back from break. I know, I'm sorry. We can go on to the next slide. Thank you. And then Alicia and Eric.
Hello, this, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sí, la
I-
escucho.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Alicia, and I will be introducing the commercial and industrial focus area, part 1. Next slide, please. The commercial and industrial focus area brings together, I think, in a very concrete way, the work of the emissions inventory and community feedback. So in this group of actions, I think you're really going to see how we have addressed a lot of these community concerns, and also shown the issues that they sort of embody in the emissions inventory. So in our strategies. Sorry, I walked in here and I kind of lost my train of thought. So anyway, but for tonight, part 1, we'll talk about fugitive dust, and we'll talk about backup generators, and these are basically backup diesel generators. That's what we'll talk about tonight. Next month, we'll talk about part 2. Part 2 has the bulk of the commercial and industrial actions, okay? In April, we'll talk about actions related to health risk assessments. We'll talk about actions related to improved permitting. We'll talk about actions related to enhanced enforcement, and also actions related to commercial sources. So that would be things like auto body shops. Okay, next slide, please. So the first topic that we want to give you a little bit of background on is about diesel generators, backup diesel generators. Now, there's a lot of backup generators throughout East Oakland, and they're used to power things that cannot ever be turned off. So that's going to be your data centers and other activities that need that constant power supply, okay? And taken sort of individually, they're not that considerable of a source, but collectively is where you start to see some potential for contribution to the cancer score. Next slide, please. Okay, so this back in, I think, May of last year, the Air District and Communities for a Better Environment came up with kind of a community-friendly guide to the emissions inventory. So this is a figure from that inventory. And what this figure shows is that 40% of the diesel emissions, 40% of the contribution to cancer risk is from those backup diesel generators, okay, out of permitted sources, okay? And so you can see that it's higher than curing ovens, which is cultured marble products, and higher than some of these other sources, including, gas stations and even the crematories. However, because they're dispersed, it's sort of a different, kind of question than being located next to, like a point source, like a crematory. So next slide. Okay, so this is a slide that really hones in on the airport. So on the left side of the screen, you see an aerial view of the airport, and you see that there are large circles on that slide, on that section of the map. And so those are indicating the number of generators in a particular location. Okay, so the airport has a concentration of these backup diesel generators. And then, the picture just shows what one of these generators will look like. So that, sort of to conclude, would say that the backup diesel generator is part of those small commercial sources. And we have some actions that we'll be talking about tonight that help to address this to reduce the emissions. And I will now turn the presentation over to Eric Laura.
Thanks, Alicia. Next slide, please. All right, now we can kind of get into fugitive dust. Good evening. It's nice to meet everyone. My name's Eric Lara. I'm in the Regulatory Development Division, and I'm the lead rule developer on the fugitive dust rules. Today, I'll be giving a general overview of the Air District's dust regulations and sharing some updates on how we're working to strengthen them. And we'll also go over some real world examples of dust impacts that are relevant to your community. And by the end, my goal is that you'll walk away having a better understanding of fugitive dust, why it matters, and what steps we're taking to reduce its impacts. Next slide, please. So earlier, Steve kind of talked about ultrafine PM, and that's stuff that can get really deep into your lungs. So now we're going to talk about a slightly bigger type of PM, specifically fugitive dust, which comes from the open air operations, like on the left side of the screen, sources like roads, constructions, disturbed soil, rather than like on the right side of the screen where we have, defined stacks, chimneys, or defined points in general. But even though these particles are bigger, they're still small enough to be inhaled, and they can still hang in the air and affect our air quality. So breathing in too much of this PM, whether it's fine or not, can definitely impact your lungs and heart. So it's important to know where it comes from and how to manage it. Next slide, please. Yeah, you can go through all the animations. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, so fugitive dust can come from many sources, and I know, there's some in your community, but just give it a little bit of extra context and background. We have material storage and handling where things could be piled up, large piles of dirt, sand, gravel. We have construction sites where they might be doing some digging, some demolition, some earth moving activities that might occur at different times of the year. Some crushing and processing operations where there could be some material that's being broken down, including concrete, rock, or asphalt. And then we have the unpaved roads where dust can be kicked up by vehicles or by wind. Many of these sources tend to be temporary and or small scale. So in some cases, they might not require permits. So that's what makes it harder to track and regulate. But luckily, we have some rules that I can get into later on. Next slide. Yeah, so this source category and the activities that we're concerned about are unique because unlike a refinery or a factory where there's fixed emission points, fugitive dust can come from basically anywhere. And it's harder to track because it's episodic, which basically just means it's unpredictable, sporadic, with no set pattern, and it's scattered. So it comes from open areas and not a single stack, like I mentioned earlier. And lastly, it depends on the conditions such as wind, vehicle movement, and frequency of the material that's being handled. Some common activities that generate this fugitive dust include moving, dumping, transferring materials, hauling sand and gravel, and basically anything that disturbs this loose material. So that's why it takes some proactive planning to kind of get ahead on making sure that we limit the fugitive dust in the air. Next slide. Yeah, so for this case study, I kind of chose this facility. It was listed on your community concerns document, Gallagher and Burke. I just wanted to use it as an example of like the daily considerations that operators have to make while while managing the dust that could be on their sites. I've never been to the site, but these are just some general like site considerations that inspectors and facility operators need to make in assessing their operations. And as you can see in the image, there's various roads which look unpaved or dirty. There are many possible locations where material could be dropped or moved, and it seems like there could be a lot of truck traffic. So these are just some things to keep in your head. And to stay in compliance with our rules, the facility needs to make sure that they properly manage the roads that are on site to ensure that this truck traffic doesn't stir up any dust, manage any material spills, whether they're from trucks hauling material in or out, or heavy equipment that's moving things around. So they need to make sure that those get cleaned up before it becomes airborne. And for material stockpiles that may be on site, they have to be properly maintained and placed in areas where they won't spread dust into the community. And then vehicle speed limits should be enforced and making sure that the loose material on the roads doesn't generate any excessive dust. So these are just some general like best practices, and our air district inspectors regularly survey and observe these operations to ensure that they comply with these regulations. Next slide. So now we can look at Argent, which it's a similar case with its own kind of different circumstances and considerations. Many of you remember visiting this site last year. I was there. We got to see the operations firsthand. So like other facilities, Argent must find ways to control their dust based on their own specific activities and operations. Some of the dust control measures we saw while we were there, they were using water sprays on the piles to keep dust from becoming airborne. They had some street sweepers to clean up any loose material. And they had these things called rumble grates at their exits, which basically shake off dirt from tires before they hit public roads to try to mitigate any impacts. But the key takeaway from both situations are that, these sites require some different approaches to managing dust. And each site kind of requires different dust control methods depending on its location, its wind conditions, and activities on site. So there's no one size fits all approach, which is why we must assess their risks and apply the right strategies. Next slide, please. So the way that Air District enforces fugitive dust rules currently are mainly through Rule 6.1, which applies to all facilities and sets limits on this visible dust, fugitive dust. And to make these assessments, inspectors have to have the sun behind them, as you can see in the picture. And this isn't always possible or safe for various reasons. Another thing about this test method, it requires prolonged exceedances above the limit, which isn't also possible sometimes with fugitive dust, given that they're typically short bursts and makes it harder to catch because it's happening sporadically. And then we also have Rule 6.6, which focuses on preventing trackout, which is trackout is just dust or dirt that's carried onto the public roads. However, it only applies to certain sites and it leaves out many smaller or temporary operations. So, while we have these rules in place and they generally address some of these issues, they do have some gaps. So we definitely know that there's a need for more enforcement tools and a need to strengthen compliance and improve the air quality. Next slide. So briefly want to get into the white paper that we did where it was the first step in exploring, looking for gaps. It responded to the concerns shared from the West Oakland Community Action Plan and other AB617 communities and the Advisory Council. So some of the goals were just to find ways to strengthen PM controls, find regulatory gaps, and improve compliance and enhance the rules' effectiveness. Some of the methods we used were researching how other air districts were regulating fugitive dust and reviewing best practices across the state to see what we could work on in our region, and noted where we can even make them even better by going farther than what they're doing now. So overall, this helped shape a stronger approach in addressing the gaps in the current rules. Next slide, please. So the white paper provided, valuable findings that, we reviewed and assessed further after the fact, after we published it to see, so we could vet what strategies actually can make sense for us. Some were feasible and some weren't upon deeper research, but it has still helped us refine our focus. And so from there, we identified strategies with the greatest community impact, ones that we could ensure were practical, enforceable, and easy to follow. A white paper is just a different fancy way to just say research paper or anything. It's nothing too out of the ordinary. Yeah, sorry, next slide. Sure. Yeah, so throughout this process, since we've published the white paper, we've been gathering public input, meeting with various stakeholders like you, to kind of better understand some community concerns and situations, looking at case studies and finding, industry perspectives as well. These discussions have been critical in shaping our approach because we want to ensure that the proposed strategies address actual real world challenges and are both effective and practical to implement. Next slide, please. So this is kind of a summary of what the feedback we've gotten. Community concerns kind of focused on the need for even stronger enforcement, more oversight, and the desire for cleaner air. Other stakeholders raised concerns about potential costs associated with these controls. some administrative challenges, and the need for clear, simple rules to achieve compliance. And from a regulatory perspective, with other existing city counties that might have some dust control on their books, the goal is to ensure that we have some measurable air quality improvements while keeping the rules aligned with their existing regulations, so they could be easy to implement as well. So next slide. Yeah, so as we move forward, we're working to make the rule clearer and easier to follow and more enforceable. This means specific control measures for different activities, so sites know exactly what to do. And it's not a good faith thing, it's something that's on the rule. And we're also improving these enforcement tools and finding methods that they could, on the ground, find whether it's compliant or not, easier, other than just relying on the visible emissions opacity tests. And so basically, what's next and what does this mean for the rule? General visible emissions limits aren't enough. We need structured requirements that provide clear guidance on how sites should control dust. And to improve compliance, the rule should outline specific measures for different activities, making expectations clear and enforcement more effective. And to achieve the above, we'll be engaging the community even more and considering all options as the process progresses for our next steps, which can be seen on the slide. And to stay informed on all the upcoming regulatory activities for the rule, I encourage everyone to sign up for the listserv to get automatic updates on upcoming milestones. And the link could be shared with everyone after this meeting. I might just put it in the chat as well. Yeah, so that ends my presentation. Thanks. Are we going to open it up for questions or go to the next activity? Or
yeah, two questions. This first one, the backup generators section. I'm wondering if the airport could talk a little bit more about, like, are we talking about like bona fide backups? Are we talking about, what is it, AP or what is it, GPUs for? It seems like a lot of generators concentrated at the airport. Cause like in my mind, like we, if it's for like critical infrastructure, this is a backup power source, you put it on for 6 minutes a month just to test it, use it.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's it, yeah.
If it's a backup generator, it's not running 24/7 or anytime except to test it monthly.
Cause we're looking at a GPU in the picture, right?
I don't,
That's not
yeah,
ours.
it looked like it was
There's
a
a little-
generator assigned a GPU.
Yeah,
And-
I think that's our airport.
Yeah, I would just say that we're moving towards renewable gas, natural gas, for this next generator for our airfield lighting that we're currently designing. So,
That's what, that makes sense.
yeah, I mean, you have to have these, but again, they're not running nonstop. So I was wondering about that big circle on the airport.
What are they for? They're for.
Well,
Secure.
if there's a blip, if there's a loss of power, we can't, they immediately go on. If they're backup generators.
So that the lighting.
So that the
has to stay
airfield
on.
lighting, the ticket counters, what the customer service, amenities inside of a terminal building, keep going, even if there's a power outage.
Okay,
And then,
yeah.
sorry, this is the second question, just real quick. On the fugitive dust, because we're looking at a lot of the strategies, but I'm not sure, and maybe I missed it. Have we quantified? We talked in general terms about the impact, but have we quantified what what's the gap between the strategies and if, fugitive dust is still actually having an impact on the community?
Because they said it has an impact on the employees as well. That's what I did. In the presentation.
I can either go or we'll go together or we'll go right now.
I have two questions, maybe we can, and then are there any questions online?
Sí, yo tengo una pregunta, ¿verdad? Bueno, es un comentario y también es una pregunta, ¿verdad? De lo que
I'm just thinking
estábamos
like this, you
hablando,
have to get
¿verdad?
ready. Gotta go to the store.
Oh,
If you,
Danny, sorry, you're unmuted if you
then
would
we
like.
have to get the bed prep ready
Oh.
for you two to be in there.
Hey, Danny, do you mind reading your?
¿me escucha?
Yeah. We can hear you.
Sí, lo que estoy hablando, ¿verdad? Es un comentario y también tengo una pregunta, ¿verdad? Estamos hablando de los polvos fugitivos de estas dos fábricas que están ya, ¿verdad? Haciendo este trabajo. No sé si él o el inspector ya fue, ¿verdad? Ya hizo esa investigación de esos polvos que están existiendo en esas compañías y qué es lo que descubrió, si ya pueden funcionar al aire limpio o tienen que cambiar varias estrategias para tener un aire de mejor calidad.
Yeah, I can kind of take a stab at that. That's funny. I was going to respond in Spanish, but I'll talk in English. Yeah. So the inspector, he always goes, or he or she or they always go out and continue to do investigations if there's complaints or if they're doing routine inspections. It's never like a closed shut case. They can always respond and make sure that they're meeting the limit. And right now, the sites, since they don't have prescribed measures or requirements, they just do whatever they need to remain in compliance with the opacity test methods in the rule 6.1. So, yeah, hopefully that answers the question a bit. Happy to talk offline as well.
I'm happy to respond if it would be helpful. And please don't hold back if I'm here. I've been doing it for 6 years, so I'm getting kind of tough skin. So as far to your comment about the health of the folks on site, we test everyone that works in the yard annually to make sure hearing and respiratory testing every single year. The people are outfitted with what they need to protect themselves, not just respiratory, but hearing and yeah. So everyone that works in our facility, and I can't speak to anyone else, but our facility, if you're exposed to noise that's higher than what you would want to be exposed to, dust, if you're exposed to any kind of hazard, we have an applicable safety response to that. We also check the respiratory health and the hearing health of our folks annually, which is required, but we do it annually to make sure that you're not losing your hearing beyond or your lung capacity beyond what you normally would as a human. As far as the controls that we apply, I think what the Air Board is saying is very true. There are a lot of rules, and we talked about this earlier in this contracting discussion. How do you put contracts out and hold contractors accountable to the rules, and how do you get people to do the right thing versus fill the paperwork out correctly? That's a very real analogy to what we find ourselves dealing with, which is, yeah, you can pass the rules, but is the community going to be happy? Are we going to have a negative impact in the community? Those are two very different things.
I'm gonna just because we do have to move on to the activity.
Yeah, I would just say that we're currently working on how to create and implement real solutions, and we will continue to invite CSC out to see what we're doing as we get to the next stages.
Thank you. Okay, who's moving on? Alicia? Are you going over the instructions?
Yes. Okay. So this is Alicia. So I just wanted to kind of walk you through our handout. So in your rooms, your breakout rooms, you'll look at the actions. And so the handout that you'll be looking at starts with the strategy, and then it has a strategy objective, and then it has an action, and the actions all have titles. Okay. And then you also have who would be leading that action. So that's an overview of the handout, or the activity kind of discussion prompt. Next slide, please. And so you'll have, there'll be 3 breakout rooms, and they'll be facilitated, and if you're online, you'll be using your Zoom controls. And then we'll come on back. Next slide, please. All right, so as I said earlier, we have, I think there's 5 actions total. So there's 2 strategies and 5 actions. So there's not a lot to review here because the bulk of the actions are coming next month. But what we want to know is what resonates with you about these actions and what's something that maybe hasn't been addressed. But the one caveat there is that there's a lot coming next month. So keep that in mind. Okay, I think that's the overview. I think we can break out. I did want to talk about our next steps. And as I mentioned earlier, tonight was part 1. It was a small subset of the overall commercial and industrial actions. And next month, we'll talk about part 2. And we want to flag for you that there's considerable background information to get us ready for next month. And that background information is actually coming from some of the meetings from the last 2 years that you all have been meeting and talking about the development of the plan, and that we have all been meeting. So we'll be sending that out, and we're asking for you to please look at those materials ahead of the meeting, and look at those actions ahead of the meeting. We're going to send out the drafts. So if it works for you, if you have time, look at the drafts before the meeting so you can come to the meeting with your questions, with your observations, and we can have a little bit of a different conversation if you've already looked at them. Okay, thank you.
Next slide. Next slide.
Is that, I can't hear what?
Slide. Next slide. There we go.
And quickly, I just want to, I think, pass it over to Yami, who went to one of Jamaica's events this past week in Jamaica. Soel is one of our CSC members who works at Roots Community Clinic. So just wanted to pass the mic over to Yami to report out on some community engagement really quick.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me? Hi, everyone. So I attended Roots Clinic's 40 by 40 Neighborhood Empowerment Day event on Saturday. We me and Marina tabled during the event to do some outreach to community members about the East Oakland CERT process, ways to get engaged, and even like filling out our survey to give some feedback on the CERP and some draft actions. We also talked to about 70 participants, and I don't know if Marina wants to say anything about that, but yeah.
Sí, también quería mencionar, ¿verdad? Que estuve muy contenta de estar ahí, ¿verdad? Porque pues también a la gente que habla español, le dimos mucha información sobre lo que estamos haciendo, quiénes somos, y vi que mucha gente no sabía qué era, ¿verdad? Lo del aire, del medio ambiente, y vimos que estaba muy contenta la gente con esa información y dijeron que está muy, muy bueno el trabajo que estamos haciendo y estamos pues contentas, ¿verdad? Estoy orgullosa que estuve con mi compañera ahí en la mesita. Gracias.
Okay, and I'll pass it back to whoever is closing us out.
Yeah, so yeah, thanks everybody for coming to the March meeting. Our next meeting will be April 10th. Make sure to fill out the post-meeting survey. I think the docs will also be open for feedback for like another week or so by March 20th. So is there anything you weren't able to put on there? Make sure to get them on the doc. Yeah, thanks for everybody online. Thanks for everybody in person. just a reminder, when you're online, you get the DoorDash stipends. And also if you're in person, there are childcare and transportation stipends and reimbursement options. So yeah, just wanted to remind everyone about that to try to just advance the equity for the CSC. So yeah, thanks everybody. I think we'll see everybody on April 10th.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Gracias a todos, bendiciones y buenas noches. Nos vemos el